All right, Mr. Ballentine has put together some documents for you. The first document here kind of gives a comparison of, we've got a rough estimate right now on the Senate and the House budget, and we're just using those numbers. Of course, there's not a calc template. You can see the projected revenue up at the top when we look at governor's proposed, House proposed, and Senate proposed. You can look at the salaries with the Senate proposed or the governor's proposed. That would include the 1% bonus. Right now, what we're seeing in the House and in the House and the Senate. Did we not have enough copies?
No, he was just asking. Do you know Roger, sir?
Yeah.
Roger Bean Keeney.
Asking.
Do you want to
You
ask
have a
her?
question?
No.
Okay. There's a 3% proposed for the House and the Senate right now. What they're talking about is a 3%. So what we looked at was 3% plus a step for teachers and instructional assistants, and then 3% for everybody else. One of the things that we definitely want to do is continue to be competitive with our teacher salaries, our instructional assistant salaries, and that's similar to what we did last year when we got the 5%.
Switch the camera on or what?
We did a 5% plus a step for teachers and instructional assistants, and then just a 5% for everybody else, because you have to certify that everybody at least gets a 5%. And that allows us to, and so that's figured into that overall where it says salaries and benefits, and you can see it's step plus 3% for grades 1 through 6, 3% inclusive of the step. So what we're saying there is that if there's 1.5% between each step, then they get a 1.5, so the total would be a 3%. Then you look
Now,
down.
just for clarification, the House budget has a 3 3/8%, which
Yeah.
that's probably what the money they had left worked out to state-wise, but so we would have to revise the cost under that if that's what ends up being it, but 3 3/8%.
Then when you look down at additional costs, substitute cost, we look back and it was budgeted for $725,000. Rob's right now projecting that we're going to be this year around 1.15, 1.2,
Possibly.
with trends right now where we're at. And so we said, okay, let's look at 1.3 right now for that. Now we're in the process of putting together an RFP to send out to see if there's other sub-companies and see if there's something. I know Mr. Lee is working on that RFP to get that posted. There is an increased custodial cost. So, that was delivered to the board at the last work session. So you guys are aware of that. And basically what we have there is it's a lot of turnover in the staffing with the janitorial, and so to help with recruit retention and get people on board, that was one of the proposals that was delivered to our board last Wednesday at our work session. So
I just wanted to clarify one thing. This may sound like a stupid question, but the only stupid question to me is the ones that weren't
correct. Yes, sir.
asked. At the very first line, you've got grade 1 through 5 teacher.
Mhm.
That's not grades 1 through 5
Right.
teacher.
That's salary.
It's a salary
Salary
grade,
grade,
okay,
correct.
good.
So when we
That's
use
a great question.
when we use grades, so grade 1 is a bachelor's level.
Okay,
Grade 2 would be a bachelor's plus 15. Grade 3 would be a master. So
Okay.
each grade is you're adding a degree onto it.
okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. Then we also have down here special programs coordinator position, non-labor budget. So when you look at the non-labor budget, that's where the biggest increase as far as for this year that we're seeing. And we did provide, and we'll go through those documents today. As far as when it comes to the non-labor budgets. So if you look at the governor's proposed, the House proposed, Senate proposed, that bottom there on number 4 would show, okay, this would be the locality and it, as far as where we're at, as far as looking at what we're trying to accomplish right now. There are some savings that you could do when you look at other considerations. So right now, what we're including in the top is that we're covering the increase for the health insurance as a division. So we're not throwing that off onto the employee. If you were to share the cost between the division and the employee, then that would be $302,000. So you can see that in red. Other things that that are not included in this are, of course, the communication specialists that 10 years experience on a teacher scale, additional high school agricultural teacher, additional teacher at RESIs, and additional reading specialist. Now we do include the 3 reading specialists that we have to have already in the top up there at the beginning. So
These costs include benefits. These aren't
Yeah.
just the salaries.
right, that's benefits. That's total cost to the school division.
I was just wondering, when you were talking about the health insurance, what is the standard, kind of like the best practice across the board?
As far as
Whether or not the teacher or the employee pays 100%, if it's split 50-50, if it's split 30-70, or if the institution carries the whole thing.
So I think that varies. I mean, you always have, and I was going to make copies of these. Sorry, I was running late to get here, so I'll make some copies real quick. But I will go over something as far as verbally right now, but I will give you the copies of this. And actually, when we look at health insurance, and you're comparing this year to next year, because our increase, we were budgeting for 10%, and it went up 7.9.
7.9.
7.9. So, for instance, last year, and I will just use let's just use I think most of our people are on employee children, right? Were they?
Most are on employee only on the
Okay.
Key Advantage 1000.
Okay. So if you look at the Key Advantage 1000 employee only, currently the cost to Warren County is $635. The cost to the employee each month is $51.
Okay.
So if you look at going to next year with the renewal and we retain that, we don't increase onto the employee, that would go for the division up from $635 to $689, and the division or the employee would stay at $51.
Okay.
Now, if you look at sharing that cost on that Key Advantage 1000, that would increase the division to $662. That would take the employee up to $78. And so, that's just some things that we are looking at as far as, I've always tried, since I've been here, to not increase the employee portion. We've been lucky enough, some years we've had enough of a break to where rates didn't go up and we were able to just absorb it. But then last year we had to use, what was it, Rob, 300 and some thousand out of our health insurance account to cover that so that it didn't go up on the employee.
Okay. All right.
So. So then these next sheets, Rob, I'm going to let you go over these next sheets here that you have, and I'm going to go make some copies of this for you.
Okay. Well, the next sheet is showing the different budget scenarios. The left half of the page is all state funding. And what I've done is shown a history going back to fiscal year 2022. In these, I use what the approved budget was for that year, so you sort of are comparing apples to apples from one year to the next. We do receive additional appropriations throughout the year on occasion. So what I have there, the last in the middle section, or on the left-hand section rather, the last 3 columns show what the governor has proposed, what the House has proposed, and what the Senate has proposed. And if you follow those down the page, there are some differences in some areas, and then at the very bottom would be our total state revenue based on what the governor proposed, what the House proposed, and then what the Senate proposed. And of course, as we know, that hopefully somewhere in between there, we'll end up with a number from the state before the General Assembly is over this year. On the right-hand side are our federal miscellaneous and then county appropriation, those revenues, showing the history, and then what our proposed is for next year. The federal programs, they typically stand pretty flat from one year to the next, the appropriations we get for those. The one you will notice at the bottom of the federal there, the CARES funding, we will have used all of that this year by the end of this fiscal year. So that funding will hit the funding cliff on that one, so to speak, and that one does go away. The miscellaneous type revenues, those don't vary too much from year to year either, but we have adjusted some to reflect changes there that are coming our way. As Dr. Ballenger mentioned a little earlier, we transferred $300,000 from our health care fund to the operating fund to subsidize, cushion the increase in premiums that would have otherwise been passed on to the employees. This is the last year of that fund that we'll be able to do it. It's down to, as of today, about $40,000, and this is the fund that's left over from when we were a self-insured employer. The county appropriation, just for illustrative purposes here, I left it level funded from this year to next year, and to show what the effect was. And then when you come down in that far right column, what I've done is taken, first of all, the grand total budget, which would come from the governor's budget over on the left-hand side of the page, adding the various the federal miscellaneous and the county money to it, and that would give us the budget of $73,696,855. Same thing going down that column, the House budget, which you can see would be more based on the fact that the state budget would be greater if the House budget's adopted. And then finally the Senate budget, what that would do. So I'll take a pause and ask if anyone has any questions. And again, typically we find that somewhere in between these three versions, once the General Assembly is finished their work and a budget's approved, we end up somewhere in there.
So basically what you're doing is that to start with a, how would you say, I can't think of the word right now, but just a starting point, you're taking a look at what the county appropriated last year.
Yes.
And then you're looking at it from the viewpoint of, okay, so if the House goes through, if the governor goes through, if the Senate goes through, because you're saying that the federal is pretty, I mean, it's pretty set. It's not gonna change.
Other than like when the CARES funding was dumped on us back during the pandemic, right, and things like that, but right, the regular title programs that are, over a long period of time we've had and hopefully will continue to have, they don't fluctuate a whole lot. Okay. They stay pretty stable.
And when you look at the federal dollars, we have to use these last year's numbers because we won't get our final notice from them until September.
Yeah.
Or October when it comes to what our federal dollars, our total amount will be.
Yeah, their fiscal year runs on an October to September basis, so we have to start our year just with an estimate of what theirs is going to be, and typically it comes out close.
But the reason I was bringing that up was because I guess I was taking a look at it from the viewpoint of, okay, if you take a look at the governor the House and the Senate, and then, and instead of holding the county at a certain level, you say, okay, if those fluctuate, then the county will fluctuate here. And I was just wondering, was that just easier to figure it that way, or?
Well, the reason I do it that way is just sort of to show what the effect of everything else is on our budget without the county changing anything.
Okay.
So we can see where that lands us and then, make decisions from there.
And so the numbers here, the numbers here that you've got, the difference between, what is it? This is 73, 75, and 76.
Right.
I was wondering if you've got a number there that you've determined, okay, this is what we need right here. So if these numbers fluctuate,
Yeah.
do you have that, or is this?
Well, that would be what the superintendent's proposed budget will be, and I don't want to speak for him, but I think we're still in
So I
that
think
process.
that's kind of where we look at that first sheet, because that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rob,
Mhm.
when you look at this first sheet, that number down there would be the increase to the locality with the current.
That number 4, if.
Yeah.
Now, where is that reflected in this? It's not, is it?
It's not reflected.
It's not
there, no.
reflected
If you
there,
take
okay.
what's reflected on that page, throw it up here, and then start taking the various costs away from it, it leaves us with a deficit, so to speak, of this amount if we would be level funded from the county.
Okay.
So then based on what you perceive your needs are gonna be for next year, if the county, if you had a set amount from the county, what you're saying here is that these would be the required additional county appropriations based on what you got last year and this upcoming year.
That would be moving into next year.
Yeah, moving into
That would be
next
good.
year. So we're looking at, for the governors, it would be 5.7 million. For the House, it'd be 4.9 million, and for the Senate, it'd be 4.1 million. And that's what you would need from the county in order to meet all of the needs that, or not the needs, but what you're putting into the budget and saying, this is what we think that we need in order to,
Right, and if you look at that, when you look at those numbers of 5.7, 4.9, and 4.1,
Mhm.
if you look our non-labor, and that's the one where we do our zero base
Mhm.
modification with all of our cost centers for them to look at and say, okay, this is what we need for this year.
Mhm.
So we have wiggle room in that 3.617 million. So those are increases that people have requested for next year. So if you take that 3.6 and you say non-labor was level funded, then you take 3.6 away from that 4.1 under the Senate budget. So that is, when you look at those numbers, and that's where we talk about our non-labor is, really our labor is set. The only additions that we're adding are the 3 reading specialists that by code we have to have. And then we've added right now the special programs coordinator. We didn't add, the communications person is not added into this one, which is something that I think, I believe my full board is in agreement that is something that as a division we truly need as a school district. So looking at those, we have, the salary, there's not a lot that we've done on the salary except for go up 3% or plus a step or something.
And that's
like that.
reflected in what the governor, the House, that they've kind of like, I'd say that they probably account for at least half of that.
Yeah, I mean,
Their increase
we're gonna,
will cover for at least half of that.
yeah, I think our LCI is what is our LCI, Rob? 474?
It's going to 4517, so basically
4517.
45%.
Yeah.
What's an LCI?
That's called the Local Composite Index, and that's, each jurisdiction has that calculated. People call it the ability to pay, so that a more affluent county, the state doesn't fund it at as high a level or higher percentage of cost as it does a less affluent county.
Okay.
Ours is right at 45%, and I think the ideal split would be 55-45. So we're pretty much right in the middle of the range of that. And some of them go from 0.8%, meaning the state only pays 20%, and others go down to what, 20%? Is that the
20%.
low?
And actually, I mean, I
The
believe
lowest?
Lee County is probably the lowest, and they actually, their locality can't even meet, and so the state is actually, I think, funding them at 85%, or funding them higher because the locality cannot support.
Where's Lee County within?
That's way down there, way
Southwest.
down there, Southwest Virginia.
Virginia.
Southwest Virginia, okay.
Yeah, that's way down there. So I think
way
that's
down
the,
in mining country.
yeah, I think that's the only county, and I believe it's Lee, don't quote me on that, but I know it's a county down in that area, is one of them that, the locality still has trouble with making ends meet down in that area.
So if I can ask, so this is essentially a change from flat. All this on this front page is a change from level funding. In other words, this would be an additional amount, this would be additional amount, this would be
Yes.
additional. Okay.
Well, it's, yes,
Because you're starting with these numbers down here up the top of here.
yeah.
What is on 3 F-125 non-labor? I'm trying to figure out how we get down to the 5.7, 4.9, and 4.1. What's the 10.9, 10.9, 10.9? That's level
That's how
funded.
much our non-labor is this year.
Well, what does that mean?
That just means if we would say for our non-labor portion of the budget that we're only going to spend as much next year as we have budgeted this year, that's the amount it would be. Then, based on, as Dr. Ballenger mentioned, having each of our cost centers and schools look at it, they, in addition to that, the amount that they came up with doing a zero-base budget is, across all of them, adds up to the 3.6 million. Which is a number, as was mentioned, I think we can look at, and we'll have to look at.
And that, this column is gonna be the 10 million.
Okay.
This is the add-on.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay, so if nothing changed,
nothing changed. We
then
end up
non-labor, it
with
was
10,988,000.
Okay.
So the transportation here, that's the school buses.
That's the school budget's transportation.
Yeah.
And what's included in there, I think is like 800,000
For
for
buses and vehicles.
buses and vehicles.
So
Which-
Yeah, that's everything included, and I think maybe your question was like, what is the non-labor budget? So that, these two pages show what is a part of that what comprises that non-labor budget. Is that what you were wanting to know as well?
Yeah, and that's buying new buses, new vehicles, things like that. And that's the increase of 843,000.
Yeah, that's, the majority of that would be that 840,000.
Okay.
I mean, because a bus is $126,000, $130,000.
That's what I thought. So then we're looking at probably, what, 6, 7 buses there in that, in just the increase.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I have a question, like, for example, under 2E, or 2C rather,
Right.
so these are the deltas, they're additional this, increase that, increase that. So if this is non-labor, like, for example, if I looked at cost center 907, and it says subs, and that's 736, then on 2C, 574 would be what you want to budget in addition to what's in this
Yes.
non-labor
Yes.
budget. Okay.
You know what,
There's a slight,
actually, there's
a slight error there.
there's an error there.
Okay.
Yeah, I was putting that together this afternoon.
It's a small, well,
Trying to
10,000.
compile some things.
So all these are non-labor So, what, for example, in this assistant superintendent administration, that 2.3 million, is that like capital projects, or what is the?
A large portion of that is our custodial services contract. He's in charge of facilities, and
That's considered non-labor?
yes,
Because
because
it's
we
contract.
contract it.
Okay.
Because we
We-
contract.
Anything
pay
that's
it to-
contracted, it's
to a
not
third
your
party.
direct.
It's not, they're not our employees.
I got you,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, same way with the substitutes.
Mhm.
So, if I may ask, over on this cover sheet,
Yeah.
it says the increased cost is 135.
Right.
So how do I get from 135 to the 840?
To the,
This page,
uh-huh.
you were saying that that the assistant superintendent for instruction is
Well, actually, it was admin.
840,000.
It's for admin.
Yeah, admin. The assistant superintendent for admin up under 900.
223.
Yeah, 2,323,000, and it goes to 2,546,000.
Yeah.
So that is another thing, that may be in there twice. We may be able to remove the 135, because
Okay.
I think he's included that in the increase in the line, which is the 223.
What is the assistant superintendent for administration?
That's the office that Buck Smith is in, and again,
So
the vast amount of it is for the custodial contract.
He's over facilities, transportation, discipline, FOIAs,
Nutrition.
child nutrition.
Nutrition, yeah. So those contracts
So-
all fall under him in his budget.
And that's why you won't see a child nutrition on here, because that's a totally separate fund.
Okay.
So you were asking about the admin. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, there was,
What's the instruction?
That's our assistant superintendent for instruction, a different department, and
Yeah, but it's $840,000
it
increase
is
is
not,
what I'm
yes.
asking.
But she has
Yeah,
stuff
I'd
in
have to
there.
get the breakdown, it's things like Virtual Virginia and a number of instructional programs that we would
We
either
pay for Virtual
contract or
Virginia
pay
for
for
the
materials
students.
and things like that for it.
There was nothing in the prior year?
It was
There
in
was
different,
stuff.
different areas, it wasn't in that
It didn't get
particular
picked.
line, but it was in,
She has a budget.
well, she didn't have a non-labor there in that particular one.
so are there certain parts of the federal, and the state, and the state would include the governors, the proposed governors, proposed House, and the proposed Senate, that they come along and they say, okay, we are going to appropriate this money, and it has to be used in this specific area. And if you don't use it there, you can't use it anyplace else.
Correct.
Do you-
That's.
Do you
Like that's
have?
your
With
Title
the
I
the federal
funds.
money is pretty much
all that way.
all that way. It has to
All
be
that,
spent for very particular things.
Okay.
State funding also, now there's basic aid, which is a large chunk, and sales tax, a large chunk. Those we have discretion on, but then they do have incentive programs and categorical programs where we have to spend it and show that we spent it in certain ways to support certain of
The
their
reason I'm
efforts.
asking is because I know that the school is always looking for new ways to, say like reach the students, and, with different learning programs. And the one that it was Virtual Virginia.
Yes.
I was just wondering if you have any of those programs that they came along and they said, okay, if you use this money, you have to teach Virtual Virginia, or are these some of the things that you're taking a look at, you as the school superintendent and the school the school faculties, saying, I think that this would be a good thing for us to to put in there? How much discretionary is in there?
As far as, are you asking how much discretionary do we have as far as choosing or discretionary funds?
Funds,
Because what we try to do is budget for what the cost is going to be.
okay.
So this year, if we look back at our Virtual Virginia bills that we've had, and if we paid, say, $150,000 or $200,000 in Virtual Virginia, we're going to try to budget that same amount for the next year.
But I was just wondering, do you have a number that you come along and say, okay, all these different programs here, we think that these are really good, but these are discretionary programs, and if we don't offer these, we're not gonna lose any funding?
I mean, really, just thinking off the top of my head, the only one as far as if we don't offer, I mean, like
The
Virtual
federal,
Virginia.
They tell
You have to do the federal or you're gonna lose
Right,
it.
Yeah.
right.
If we don't give the 3%, then we need to take the money out of the budget because you're not gonna get it from the state.
No,
I mean, things like that, as far as, that what you're talking about?
no, it would be like
I'm trying to
programs,
understand.
programs that you'd be offering that, that the school is having to, say, buy a program here for $300,000. And that's discretionary on the part of the school. Do you have a number that, for those discretionary programs? Because the increase in salaries, I got that. Because if I was a teacher, I'd be looking for an increase because, shoot, in the last year, I don't know how much things have gone up over Martin's. And I think it would not be a wise thing for us not to give, the increases in salaries.
So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but my take on the state revenue is we have very little discretion with that because they fund us for the standards of quality, let's say. Well, we have more positions, as does every other school in the state, than what the standards of quality say we have to have. We have to have that to operate.
Yeah.
And then they're only funding 55% of that. So guess who's funding the 45%? The locality. So by the time you meet all those standards and then other programs that they have, if they throw money in for an incentive for salary increases, again, they're not going to pay all of that 3% salary increase. They're going to pay 45% of the bare minimum positions they say we should have. So when you go through all of that, there probably isn't much, if anything, left that we really have a lot of discretion on. Where we have the discretion, I think, probably is when they show for intervention and remediation, they give us so much money. We have some discretion there is how we spend it, but we got to spend it in that area because they're just giving us 45% or 55% of what we need to really do it. Is that a fair?
Like, and I'm gonna add on to that, I think this is what you're saying, like, if we have so much money that we have to spend on remediation intervention, there might be 5 different programs they can choose from. Of course, they wanna look at, I don't wanna speak for the superintendent, but, they wanna look at, what are the kids' needs, what program is gonna best meet their needs, so they have some discretionary as far as which program they use to meet those needs.
So then basically what you're telling me is that all of the programs that you teach are mandated by either the federal or the state government, and that the only discretion that you've got there is what different syllabus that you use in order to teach those.
Well, no, I would say if you're looking at remediation,
Now,
if
what's
you're talking.
remediation?
Remediation is, say for instance, you have a 2nd, 3rd grade student that's not on level for reading.
Okay,
They are, they've went through the assessment.
Yeah.
We've identified them as a high needs in this area, so that means they're below their peers.
yeah,
So we have to remediate them.
okay,
And so we have to have a program to help us remediate them. And so, for instance, like, 2 years ago, we bought Faunus and Pinnell.
okay,
That is a reading intervention program that we have at all of our elementary schools.
okay.
With this all-in tutoring, they brought in with the state, on the state side, Lexia.
Okay.
Then there's another one for math, and I cannot remember, Zern, for math. Now, the state right now is covering that, we're not having to, but eventually, if we're gonna continue with that, we're gonna have to pick that price tag up at some point, because, you know, when you look at, according to the state, the number of students in our division that may need remediation, you know, they're, you know, say, and I'm just throwing a number out there, but say 35% of our students need remediation. We have to have a program to help with the remediation of those students to get them on level,
Right.
so that they can continue on forward. Now, you know, we don't have, what we've tried, what I have done is we've streamlined our remediation programs. So I will admit, when I first came in here, you know, Rusty Jeffries might have had a reading program that they were doing and a math program. LFK might have had a different one. Different from U. Wilson Morrison's, different from Hilda J, different, you know. And so we've tried to streamline them to where they're all the same.
So then you tried to standardize so that,
Yes.
so that you know what you're getting across the board, instead of, well,
Yes.
we're using something here and something a little bit different over here, and I'm not real sure which
Correct.
ones are producing, you know, the best results.
Correct.
Whereas you're selecting the ones that you feel, the one that you feel is the best across the board, and saying, okay, everybody's gonna use this because this seems
It's
to be the best
research
practice.
based.
Yeah.
It's not, you know, I didn't just Google it and, hey, that looks like a great thing. We want to make sure, I mean, I know, coming from an educator standpoint, stuff I put in front of my kids, I want it to have some research behind it, that it's gonna have an
Absolutely.
impact.
Absolutely, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And, you know, with that, when looking at those programs, you know, we get the input of our teachers and our, you know, faculty to make sure that it's something that we want to do. But it also allows us, when we're having our instructional meetings,
Mhm.
we're all talking the same language.
Right.
So it's not that when we go in and say, okay, let's talk about your student data,
Yeah.
where you're at. Well, my results are telling me this, which are different than this school's results because they're using a different program.
Right.
And also, when you have a community that sometimes when you have transient, they go between one school to the next school and then
Mhm.
they move. If they're in a remediation program over here and they jump to this one and it's a different program, they may be at different levels, and so now you still got this gap.
Yeah, they basically have to start all over.
And so if you keep it the same, then you're able to just transfer that student from one school to the next, and they stay on that same level within that program throughout.
All right, well, that's a smart way to do it. All right.
Question along the lines of some of these government fundings being earmarked for certain programs.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Go.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I don't know who you are.
Yeah, hi, I'm John Stanmeyer. I'm the supervisor for Shenandoah District. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, normally, I'm not on this committee, but it was properly noticed, so that I would be able to speak today. But I'm just trying to understand.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Actually, I don't know who he is.
I didn't know who he was. I just thought he was a public, you know, community member coming in, and then I was gonna say, well, wait a minute here, but.
So my question is,
Thanks.
the CARES funding that's going away, and maybe you already covered this before I came in late, but was that funding earmarked for certain things where with that gone, you're hurting more, or do you have some of these things that are going up, like the basic aid could cover for some of the loss of the CARES funding?
So CARES funding came in, there were multiple uses for CARES funding. You could use it for anything that had to do with COVID related or, you know, bringing new area, and that's why we spent a majority or a lot of our funding out at LFK to renovate that building, because that was an old building that kept circulating air from inside the building, and so now each unit in each classroom brings air in from the outside, which keeps down the, you know, the health issues that we were having out there. When one student would get the flu in the corner, by the end of the week, the student on the other side had the flu the way it was. Now it's not gonna happen because they're isolated, so we were able to use it for that. We also had to use it for remediation and for instructional purposes. And so that's when we brought in our 51 student support coaches and student support coach instructional assistants. And at various levels, so for instance at the elementary level, when we purchased Fontes and Pinnell, we trained them in remediation. So those people were working with students in various capacities. As far as remediating, supporting, or maybe it was, mental health also. A lot of those people came in, they did have some type of mental health background. A lot of them did, but we had a bachelor's level and a non-bachelor's level. So one was on a teacher scale with a bachelor's level, and the other was on an instructional assistant scale. And they worked with our students as far as check in, check out, maybe the student needs a break, maybe it's, whatever. So we started with 51, and then our funding started dwindling down, and we went to, was it 37 this year? 34 this year. So we carried that for 2 years at 51. Then we went down to 34 this year. Now that money's gone.
Yeah.
So we had to find another way to get the money. The all-in tutoring came in, and we could use it over 2 years. So we could use it this year, or I could use it next year. So we pushed it to next year to help pay for 21 positions.
Or 17?
I believe we're
I'll have to
17.
look.
So we pushed it to next year, so we're now moving down, so we were at 51, we went to 34, and now we're going down to around 20. And so we're taking some of that staff out because of it, we have to because of the funding. So are they valuable? Yes. Are they needed? Yes. And that's one of the things that I hear from administrators and from teachers, how valuable those student support coaches are in the buildings. And right now I have a fix for a few positions for next year, but they are not included in this budget. Okay. Well, I mean, the ones we are going to get, but the ones we're going to lose, no, because that would be adding another 14 or 10 or so positions.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I have a question for you, and that's on this sheet here, the one that says the non-labor budget requests. And so is there a connection between cost center 905 and 907?
There is not.
No.
There's not, okay. And then what is the increase over here? It's 1.75 million on the technology. Is that for?
So one of the things we're going to have to do, that's going to cost a lot of money, is that, as everybody knows, is that Microsoft is doing away with, basically by next October, or not, maybe it's by next, sometime next year, every machine that is running Office, whatever, has to be replaced.
365.
Yeah, I think that's it. Because they no longer are supporting it, and there is no longer going to be any updates available. And I don't know how many of those you guys have over on your side, but that's one of the biggest tickets for us, and that's also Chromebooks, to continue to keep updating in Chromebooks, as those Chromebooks are a 5-year lifespan. I think typically 5, you can stretch 7 sometimes. But as those age out, we have to continue to replace those.
Boy, no wonder Microsoft is doing so well. Goodness. So basically, the technology is that is to replace the programs on the computers. Do you actually replace computers also?
Yeah, I think you have to replace the whole thing. Is what my understanding was. The way it was explained to me.
If the computer wasn't advanced enough to handle a new
I was
program.
gonna say, it depends on, I think it depends on the computer too, because I think a lot of people are facing that issue. It just depends on, if you get it
What your
within that
stats are.
period, it could probably handle the updates.
But the older ones.
So now, are these the computers just for the staff, or is this computers for the staff, the students, or is this computers for the students?
Some are students, some are staff.
Okay.
So, you would have to have, for instance, a lot of computers probably replaced in this office. We have over at Blue Ridge Tech with all of our drafting and our CAD. All those have to be replaced.
Okay.
So, then when you have the labs at the school for whatever they may have, wherever we would need to have those you know, those computers are for student use or
Okay.
staff use, they'd have to be replaced.
All right.
Bob, did we get through, I think there's a couple, page or two we haven't discussed yet, maybe?
Yeah, the last 2 pages are basically the 2 salary scenarios we talked about, but they're broken out by the salary scales, which we call grade, and it's spoken about a little earlier. And then it lists the description of it, so 1 through 5 is teacher, and we have 472 full-time teachers. The total of all their contracts would be the amount shown there if they're given a step increase. Then this would reflect the governor's budget, where there'd be an incentive to give them give everybody a 1% bonus at some time during next fiscal year. The cost of that, really the only payroll tax we'd have on that would be the FICA. And then the next column is the FICA for the regular contracts. And then we have 2 different rates we pay the Virginia retirement system for retirement. Our professional staff, which is by far the vast majority of our staff, in the governor's proposed budget, the rate would be 15.23%. For our support positions, and really those are our bus drivers and our maintenance employees, their rate is much, much less at 2.11%. Our health insurance, we've just lump summed it, and that would be the 7.9% increase and holding our employee harmless from any increase. And then part of VRS is what's called a retiree health credit, and VRS provides group life and disability insurance, then our workers' comp, our unemployment insurance, tuition assistance, and then you can see the totals there for each of the categories running down the page to the just $64,487,981, which is what our total payroll cost would be if we gave every employee, every position a a step increase, and then paid out a 1% bonus.
What's the step? What does that mean, step increase? Is that a
That means
numerical number?
It varies from scale to scale. The teacher scale, the largest, is
Okay.
1.3% increment between each step. So on the teachers, they get a 1.3% increase plus a 1% bonus under this scenario.
So on the step only plus 1% bonus, or
Yeah.
on this page, you've got grade 1 through 5 teacher, but then up here and this is the one, the proposed operating funding budget, you've got the 2025 salaries and benefits, where you've got the grades 1 through 6, grades 7 through 41, and then grade 42. And I was just wondering,
The 6 is
So the
the
6 is-
instructional
6 is the
assistant.
instructional assistant.
it's
So what we're
including the
saying
teachers and the
is
instructional assistants.
We're gonna give
Okay.
the
teachers, instructional assistants
Got
would
it.
get, on that second scenario, would get a step plus 3%.
Okay.
Whereas everyone else on 7 through 41 would get a step, but at 3%, but that would include their step.
okay,
And then 42 is one for a few positions that are, and how do we describe them, Dr. Ballenger? They're the non-licensed.
They're non-licensed, so they come in, maybe they have their bachelor's, but they're not certified, and they're working on their certification. Maybe they have to take a praxis test, or maybe they have to have 1 class or 2 classes. Then we put them on that scale
Okay.
because
Alright.
they're not a fully certified teacher. So Rob, I was noticing something here.
What's that?
And all
Um,
those scales are on our website too.
Yeah,
I
so.
covered them all.
So there's a couple things I wanna, so I noticed down here you have the subs, the 1.3 going over to the 1.4 in this sheet. It's on the bottom down
You know
there.
what?
So I think you have. that- I
Substitutes
think you
needs
have
to
the
come off
subs-
there.
I think, yeah.
That
So-
was from, that just
because
carried
that's the
forward.
number- Yeah,
That
'cause-
carried forward from when the description's wrong, the number's right.
Okay, so it's overtime.
That's supplements and overtime and part-time.
So-
Scratch out subs, that's just a carryover from when they were on our payroll.
Okay, so I want to make sure, because in this number, it shows 65,282 on the comparison sheet, the small sheet.
Uh-huh.
And on this other sheet, it says 65,282, but it has that 1.4 million in there. So did that get double counted?
Help me again now, you lost me.
He's on this sheet,
Mhm.
looking at the.
Yeah, so this sheet down here, you have 1.4, well, let's pull, let me use this Senate House. So this number is 65,282, you have it listed here, 65,282.
Right.
You have the 1.4, is that included in that 65,282, which would have been carried over here, and then we're doubling right there?
No, this number down here does not, this is not substitutes. The description is wrong, just scratch out subs.
What is?
That 1.4 million is what we would pay in overtime, which we pay very little of, but it would be our part-time positions and then the supplements for everything from
Like
academic
coaching,
supplements to
Okay.
coaching, athletics and all
Okay,
that.
okay.
It used to include our substitutes when they were on our payroll. And
Okay.
I've just carried it over, and quite honestly, that description needs to come out.
Okay. So that's for any
Yeah.
extra contractual agreements that we may do with
Any
a staff
supplement.
member or any supplement, okay. So that would include if a staff member is getting a supplement because of, does that in?
Not a degree supplement.
Not a degree supplement,
But
but just
any
a-
type of team leader or anything like that,
Department
Okay.
yeah.
Coach.
Any
I think
academic-
we have them all listed at the end of
Oh,
our
yeah.
Yeah.
salary scale. We have what all those supplements are as well.
See, I didn't realize that the grades here meant the different categories, because I was thinking, wow, gosh, you got 42
We
different
got
grades.
50, 40, I was gonna say 42 grades, right?
My goodness, and, you know, that people would be advancing 3 grades every year. Wow,
Yeah, we call those steps, I guess, is what
Okay.
we do, longevity steps.
okay.
Could you tell us about that technology again?
The increase?
Yeah, the 1.7. You were saying something about 365.
Office 365.
Office. Yeah, I'm,
Computers become obsolete.
I think computers are
my,
gonna, yeah.
my understanding is that the new Windows operating system is not going, a lot of our older computers in particular, the hardware is not going to be able to run it. So we're going to need to replace those, both the operating systems and the processors on some of those. Dr. Ballenger, are you checking on that now?
Yeah.
I suspect. That's my take. That may or may not be the,
So how many new positions are there in the budget?
in the budget, there are 3 new positions.
Just
The
the
3 reading specialists that we really committed to last year, and used this year as a transitional year for them, and they will move in, and they're required by the state, so they'll move into their positions, and we will backfill theirs because they are all 3, I believe, classroom teachers. So we will have to backfill their positions. So there are those 3 positions, and then the other one we really feel, or the school board has already approved, is the specialized programs coordinator position. So I guess there's a total of 4.
What does a specialized programs coordinator do?
So that is for our Pathways and Connections programs. Those are for our special education students that have high needs. And as we bring staff members in, we're needing additional trainings, we're needing additional supports in those classrooms. And so this position will support those classrooms directly by going out, supporting, helping, monitoring, training, and even serving in those classrooms.
Okay. Well, I can
We approved
appreciate
that,
that.
and so-
I can appreciate the focus on the, you know, the specialized training and stuff, and the specialized education. I think that's very valuable. So would you characterize the increase from last year to this year as being focused on the increase in compensation? And, you know, the technology, you know, the need for that technology. What other areas would you say would be increasing? And then we've got 4 new positions. What other areas would you say increase the need for
The next biggest would have been for the transportation for the buses.
okay.
Because we started that transportation fund to use some carryover money with it, and I think we just wiped that out, didn't we, Ed?
Yes.
So we started with $1 million in there, and we dwindled that down to, I think, 0 now, but, so now we have to start, you know, we still have a lot of buses that need to be replaced. The carryover for last year has to go back into the CIP account. So you can't, you know, we won't be able to request for that to go to any, you know, into a bus account. I mean, I guess we could if you guys wanted to, but I mean, you know, it was, what was it, 700,000, I think was used out of CIP to help support the budget for this year. So that means, you know, the goal was to replace that. And I think we got close to that. I don't think we hit the 700,000, but.
Now the reason why is because on the CIP is, as I understand that some of the improvements or the work that was being done over
LFK.
at LFK was not as expensive as had been projected.
Yes, some of those were under what was projected, so we did have some savings there.
Okay.
As far as projects, of course, you know, E. Wilson Morrison, we're wanting to start that, I think, in April, and it'll be done in August for the start of school. That'll give them a nice area. The next thing that we have to address, and it probably needs to be addressed over the summer, are all of our tennis courts. And right now, if you go look at our tennis courts, you're gonna see gaps in them, and that's a safety issue. We're not gonna be able to host any meets or, you know, really, we've got some courts shut down because according to what some reports I've received is that you actually have some leveling issues. And so you may have one crack up a little higher, so if you're playing tennis and you go to slide across that tennis court, you may catch an ankle. And so we have to look at those tennis courts. And from my understanding, there's been an issue with those tennis courts from the day they were built. And so, and right now, our community does use them for pickleball and things of that nature, because that's a big sport right now. So we want to also make sure they're safe for our community as well, because they're out there on those.
A couple other drivers of the budget would be about 600,000 for health insurance.
Yep.
That's pushing it. Probably just slightly over $500,000 for substitute costs, regardless of whether we go in-house or continue to contract that out. It's still gonna put us up there at about 500,000 to 600,000 more next year than what we budgeted this year.
Is that because you have more teachers that have to have substitutes for them, or?
As your number of people that need subs increase, then, you know, your pay for those subs is going to increase.
So
So
why is there an increase? you know?
People are taking their time. So one of the things that we are looking at is, you know, an incentive to say, okay, if you don't
You don't
use,
use your days.
don't use your days, we'll let you buy out, you know, your days at the end of the year at a, you know, a cost that's less than what it would be if we were paying a sub.
Okay.
But it would be an incentive, and plus it's really good for instruction, because who would I rather have in the classroom? I'd rather have that teacher, not saying that we, you know, subs are great, but that teacher is the one that I want in the classroom.
You're just looking at continuity.
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have any, if I may, do you have any possibility of looking at your policies as far as how people use those days? Like, my understanding is they can bank the days, and it's 15 days, like 10 sick and 5 personal days.
Yes, they do.
And if you look at the numbers, like they came off the frontline system, the average over the teachers is like more than 20. So it seems that people are pulling off, using all they have plus pulling out of their
But when
bank.
one thing when you look at that data, so I think what they're counting is either full half. So for me as an employee, if I took 10 half days, then I would still have a lot of days left that I could use. So when you look at that, if I have 10 days and I take half of those as sick, that would put me at 20. If I have my 5 personal and I took those as half days, that would show me as 10 absences. So that would give me a total of 30 absences
But it hasn't
over
been
the
that many
year,
full
but it's
days.
not that full day. And so that's what you see a lot of times is somebody may take a half day here, a half day there.
I guess the question is, do you perceive there's any abuse? I was relayed a story which I can't verify because it's just anecdotal to me. Somebody that took basically every Monday and Friday off until they retired, and
So we look at those things, and our policy clearly states that if we see a pattern or, if we see a pattern, we can request a note. After so many days, we can request a note.
And that's very typical across all kinds of school divisions.
But that's a problem, is it not? I mean,
It is, but it's
is
typical,
that
if you see
contrary?
a pattern, you
Oh.
can address it.
Oh,
It's very-
okay.
That's very
Yeah.
typical. I'm
That's-
saying that's very typical that it's in policy that, because if you look at all school divisions, they do get all their days up front. But it typically is, there's a policy in there somewhere that says, if the building principal sees that, oh, every Monday, you know, this person's off, then they have the right to dig in to
Deny
see.
or-
And then you can
know.
start
Deny
to-
or
yeah.
ask for a doctor's note. You know, if it's a sick day,
Yeah.
they can say, I want to see a doctor's note. And if that can't be produced, then, you know,
Yeah. And then
there's a process
yeah.
for that.
Is, can you tell me what a typical teacher's day looks like? I mean, they're not in the classroom 8 hours a day, are they?
They're in the classroom, you know, they will have their set schedule.
Right.
So if you look at it from the high school standpoint, you know, from the time the bell rings, the teacher will have their first block, since we're on block schedule, so they'll have 4 classes. That teacher will teach their first 90 minutes. There'll be a 5-minute break where they'll have to step outside, you know, into the hallway to help monitor. They may go to the bathroom. Then they may have their second block, which they will teach.
That second block would be another 90 minutes?
Would be another 90 minutes.
So the
of
kids are
teaching.
in the classroom for 90 minutes?
This at the high school level. Mhm.
Wow.
Um,
Even adults, you know, they usually give
Yeah.
a 5-minute break between, you know,
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah, and then there may be a lunch period, so there's scheduled lunches, so it may be a 20, 25 minute, 30-minute lunch. We try, you know, I would always like to try to get 30-minute lunches. But they will have their lunch period. Then maybe third block is their planning period.
Okay,
So they will not have students during that period.
right.
But that's a time for the teacher to plan, grade, do some things.
Kind
So
of
every
catch up.
teacher gets a planning period and they get a duty-free lunch.
Yep.
Now, what's
And
a
then
duty free?
a duty-free means they don't have to, that's their lunchtime, they don't have any duties during that.
I thought maybe that meant that they weren't being taxed or something.
And then
A
fourth
little
block.
different than the airport.
And then fourth block, they would have students for 90 minutes, and then that's the end of the day.
The reason why I was asking was because, you know, it was mentioned about a teacher taking a half day of, you know, maybe a half sick day or something like that. And I thought, well, maybe they're not teaching that part. But it sounds like if they do take a half day, that it does take a hit on the.
It does, so if they take it,
Morning.
say if they take it in the morning where they're teaching 2 blocks,
Mhm.
we have to have a sub for those 2 class periods, because there's students in there. Now, if they take it in the afternoon, we wouldn't necessarily need a sub, because one, that's their planning period, and then we don't do quarter days, so,
So
you
what
know,
happens
we
to
would,
the student?
we would try to have somebody, that maybe there was another sub that came in, so
Yeah.
what we try to do is if you have 2 teachers out that have taken a half day, and they have opposite planning periods,
Mhm.
then we'll move the sub to cover this class period, this day, this period, and this class period, this period. So we're only paying 1 person to cover those 2 periods.
So now the sub, it sounds like the subs come in and they're kind of a jack of all trades then.
They are, I mean, they're, you know, the teachers put the plans together, so it takes a lot of planning for a teacher to miss.
Oh.
And then there's a lot to make up when you come back. So it's really a lot of work on the teacher when they actually miss.
Okay.
Because of the pre-planning. So I was out at AS Roads just earlier this week. I had a meeting out there with the Warren County Educational Endowment. And, you know, a teacher was there until, I think she was still there at about 8 o'clock, 8:30, getting her lesson plans ready.
Okay.
Because she was gonna be gone the next day. So she had to have everything outlined and ready for the sub to come in and to be ready for those students. So, you know, teachers put in a lot of time to prepare when they're gonna be gone.
It doesn't sound like when I was in school.
And they're there
Sub
very
day was
early
blow
in the
off day.
mornings.
Yeah,
Many
yeah. There's no
teachers
watching
come, you're one
movies
person
or getting
versus a
somebody
night.
off on this, you know, trailing them off down this trail, so.
I have a question about magnitude here. This is essentially a 17% bump from, I mean, if it all works out, a 17% increase from last year. What's a typical annual jump? I can't remember the numbers, but I was looking at some of the data you sent me, and it seemed like a lot smaller from 23 to 24.
You're talking total budget or
just the
county
whole-
appropriation?
Well, no,
or-
sorry, county appropriations.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, is this a big year because a lot of stuff came up, or is this pretty normal?
So one of the things last year's budget, we did our first zero-based non-labor last year. And so as we worked through that zero base, what happened towards the end of the year for us, we held everybody the same. So even though prices were increasing for everything, we kept the non-labor budget the same for this year as it was the previous year. So they stayed flat on the non-labor. So again, this was the second year of doing this.
This is the second year.
This is the second
And
year.
they don't have that requirement now.
And, well, no, they still, I mean, they're still doing a zero base.
But it's,
But,
you're not holding them.
But, well,
You say
no.
last year you held them level?
well, last year we looked at it and we said, okay, what do we have to do? And so we did look at holding level, but now we're wanting to say, okay, we're not doing a lot of labor stuff. Let's look to see if there's anything that we do have to address in our non-labor
Okay.
budgets to see if that's really our needs as well for this year.
Right.
So that's why we wanted to leave these numbers out here because, we want to be transparent and show, hey, this is where we're at. But as I stated earlier, if we hold flat at non-labor, then you take out that $3.6 million from the overall increase there of $4 million on the Senate example. But we really want to dive into and look at our non-labor. And again, if there are some ways to get some things done towards the end of this year, I'd rather do that and then not have to ask for that for next year. So as we.
Meaning anything that's still available as you close out FY.
Right. As we look through it, so if I could buy, say if I could buy computers this year or Chromebooks this year and transfer some money to do that, let's just get that done. Then we can say, we're not gonna ask you for it. We were able to adjust some things and move some things and make it happen this year instead of next year.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that I take karate with my son over at LFK, and I haven't seen a whole lot of the school. I get to walk down the hallway, but I am impressed with the way that, at least what I've seen of the school,
And maybe we should, at some point, Dr. Daley, if, the Board of Supervisors want to go out and see some of the schools and schedule some time and take them on some tours and.
I don't think I've seen it since it was hard hat. We were there
Yeah.
almost,
So-
it's been a while, so
Yeah.
I know it's come a long way.
I stopped and looked at some of the bulletin boards that you've got there, and I thought those were very appropriate for the grades of kids that you've got there. I thought that was pretty neat.
What happens if you come to the close of the year and do have extra funds? Do those go into a fund that can push
So
over?
nope, that rolls back to you guys.
By law.
Okay.
By law.
Okay.
So that's where, like, Ed, where are we on this year's audit? Have we got that?
We do not have it yet.
You don't have that yet?
No, it's not here.
So, when the audit, so basically, if we hit the end of this year and we have $600,000 left over, that actually will roll back to you guys as the county, and then we wait for the audit to come back through to say, okay, yes, you had 600,000, because that's just our projection. We've got to wait for the auditors to give us the true dollar amount.
Mhm.
And then at that time, we would request from the Board of Supervisors, say, hey, can we put that 600,000 into a bus fund or into a capital improvement fund, because we need to do this, 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 and this.
Okay.
But it rolls back to the Board of Supervisors at the end of the year.
And if you are approaching the end of the fiscal year and you do see some money and you do see a need like the computers or whatever it is, can you pull a trigger on that, or do you go to your board and ask for that?
So there's a lot of things that'll have to go into play on that. So for instance, one, it could be that if it's over a certain dollar amount, the board has to approve it.
Okay.
Also, if it would require transferring money, that board would have to approve it, and then you guys would have to approve the transfer from one category to the next, because we're not lump sum funded.
Gotcha.
So for example, it looks like there was a 300,000 transfer for this current fiscal year. What was that used for?
So the transfer for this year,
The health
the health
That's-
insurance,
oh,
that was the
okay.
health
That's,
insurance.
that's sort of an
Yeah.
Okay.
That's our internal account,
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So for instance, if we said, okay, we wanted to purchase 6 buses, and we see that we have this money in instruction by the end of the year, then I would present that to my board. They would request that I request of the Board of Supervisors to approve the transfer
All right.
for the purchase of the buses.
Okay. Thank you. I was looking through the FY-23 versus budget and then the FY-24 appropriations. And in many cases, in fact, even a majority of the cases, schools came in under their budget, by whatever, 1.3%, 2.8%, whatever, which was pretty impressive. And then I looked for the appropriation for the next year, and in a few cases, the appropriation went down the next year, because I guess they had come in under their budget, so the next year their appropriation went down. But in most cases, they came in under budget, but their appropriation went the opposite direction. Is that, I don't know, I know we can't be too specific
Yeah.
right now, but I
Well,
mean, just as a general
two
trend, it was
things, yeah,
interesting
two
to
things
see
I
them
think
come in
that-
under budget, but then the next year appropriations grew anyway.
For one thing, by law, we cannot overspend our budget. If we go over the budget, we've broken state law, okay? And there are consequences for the two of us at these ends of the table for that. The other thing is, we have been working to make and keep our salaries competitive. And 80% of our salary, or of our budget roughly, is salaries. So even though we come in under budget this year, when you go adding a 5 or 7% increase to our salaries, even though we were under budget, that pushes it up the next
Yeah.
year. I think those
That's
are the
yeah,
two,
that makes a lot of sense, because that's
Yeah.
about what
yeah.
the increases
numbers
are.
reflect.
What is your current situation with teacher retention and teachers leaving to get more pay at another county?
I mean, and I'd have to go back, we could probably pull those numbers for you, but I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but I think Warren County has typically seen, anywhere between 10 to 15% turnover or?
Maybe in the 15 to.
Of
But
our
I
staff
think my
members?
recollection when it's been presented to us is, it's pretty typical of the counties around us. We thought what we were seeing, was.
Not isolated.
Yeah, well, we thought it was. We thought, my goodness, this is what's going on. But then when we looked at the counties around us, we found out that, gosh, they're, as one of our former HR director said, Frederick County has a Loudoun County that they lose to, and we have a Frederick County that, in the past we've lost to. So everybody has a bigger county out there, or that folks can go to. But so.
And that's challenging,
Yeah.
and that's one of the reasons I've tried to keep our health benefits, because a lot of times it's not the pay, it's other benefits, it's the environment. Those things will also keep people around.
Yeah.
And so my focus has always been to try to make sure that we are creating that environment where people want to stay and work and live and play in this county. And if we can do that by, us covering some extra benefits, to where if they leave and go to another county, they're going to get a little bit of an increase, but also their health insurance is going to increase. So then they have to balance those things out. But it is challenging, and in today's world of education, you do not have a lot of people in educational programs. So we're all fighting.
And some programs have shut down. I mean, we're seeing that in colleges, higher universities. They're Shepherd, which is in a neighboring state, but they've shut down some of their educational programs because they don't have the kids coming into it.
People just aren't, they're not becoming
Yeah.
teachers.
No, there's
Yeah,
no,
no.
the
You
candidate
mentioned,
pools are.
you mentioned some time back, somebody teaching that wasn't certified, that was getting their certificate, and those people like retired or just older people, or career changers.
So career switchers.
Yeah.
So career switchers.
Is that easier now than it used to be? Is there a facilitation of helping that happen?
They're they've made it a little bit easier, but we really look at the bachelor's or the degree that the person has. And then our HR department really works with them on making sure that they've met the requirements to get their teaching certificate. We also have 2 grow your own programs, where we are taking, we have offered to our instructional assistants that we will help you through. The one program is they go get their associates through Laurel Ridge, and then they go to JMU for 2 years, and then which they've signed an agreement with us that they have to work in the county for so many years. Then we also have those that an online program is best, and so we've partnered with Grand Canyon University, and because a lot of people will meet the income guidelines at an instructional assistant's salary level, a lot of federal dollars help to supplement that. And then we do have a little bit that we put into that, and they also sign an agreement that they're going to work. And why are we doing that? Because those are our community members that are living here that we know have a vested interest in our system, in our county, and we know that they're probably going to stay with us. Somebody that, the one thing that hurts us with recruiting is affordable housing. Most of, when we do have people come in from Pennsylvania or from other states, they're living in Frederick and they're driving here. So then when a position comes open, well, now I don't have to make that drive every day, and I'm going to get a little bit of salary bump. So I think that's one of the things when we look at affordable housing within our community. With that's one of the things that we struggle
That's a big
with.
issue for so many reasons. So we want to work on that. So
Well, it looks like that we're gonna get at least, 40 or 50 more houses within
instead of your car wash.
instead of my car wash.
And how many of them are gonna be short-term rentals?
Because a new teacher,
Yeah, new
they're not
teachers
under
are not
position to buy.
not going to buy a
Right.
$350,000 or $450,000 house.
Yeah,
So,
and that's the thing, you come in as a single new person right out of college from out of state, it's challenging to find an affordable place to
Yeah.
stay in, right in this area.
Yeah, and there's a lot of structural reasons behind that, partly like COVID and the exodus from big cities and remote working and just the interest rates locking people in their homes right now, so many things. But still, there are probably things down the road we can do as a county to try and improve the situation.
Yeah, I've heard on the news that employers are really putting a lot of pressure on folks to come back to the office because they feel that face-to-face, it's not the productivity, it's the face-to-face that people are missing.
So, but it is a challenge, I mean, but we're not the only ones facing that challenge. Yeah, and we do have to be competitive. You know, I think, Frederick, if I remember right, are they proposing almost a 8% or 5 or, I can't remember don't quote me on it. It's a pretty solid increase as far as a percentage.
Yeah.
And here we're looking at, if we do a 3% plus a step for our teachers, that equates to a 4.3%, because there's 1.3% between each step on our teacher scales. So they would actually get a 4.3% because we would do the 3% plus the step.
So what happens with your teachers when they max out, when they get up to that top?
They would
step?
just get the percentage increase for, you know, if it's
Yeah,
a,
if they're on like
If
the
it- in this case, it would be a
20, 25,
it would be a
3%.
3%.
What
Do you
raise
have a
did they
lot
get a
that
year
are up
ago?
there, or?
It was 5% plus a step.
Okay.
I was just kind of curious on that.
Or actually, we jumped that, because didn't that move to us?
What's that?
We moved that to a full 7%, didn't we, this last year?
Our
Yeah,
Our
the
increase?
raises,
Well, we did 5 and 2,
did 5 and 2.
Yeah.
Plus the step for the
plus the
teachers.
step.
So for the teachers, because we started out the year with 5, and then they did the budget in October, which gave another
Another
2, to move it to
2%.
7, and then we already gave the step, so that was 8.3%. What they started out with the 5, but then got the other 2% in January, and that came out from the state.
So at least they're keeping up with inflation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
But some of those costs come to us as a locality too.
yeah, well, and I don't like when they give a raise in the mid-year, because we've already got our budget.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's well, it does, and to come back to the, you know, to the Board of Supervisors, and say, hey, we want to give this raise, can you give us more money? I mean, you know, you've already set your budget too. So it's tough for school divisions to give a raise mid-year. You know, we'd rather do it here, let's live with it, work on it at the end of the year next year. So,
I am hopeful that if we can get to a better spot with this substitute thing, that might help with teacher retention as well, because over this past year or two, we've had trouble filling all of the subs, and then we're calling on our teachers to, in that planning period, that third block, they're then filling in a classroom. They do get compensated for that, but that definitely contributes to like just exhaustion, burnout, yeah, and just dissatisfaction. So I hope it will be popular if we're able to offer that we can pay out for some of their days. I think some teachers will appreciate that. And then also if we can get substitutes covering the spots instead of our teachers, I'm hopeful that might help as well, but, I mean, we'll see.
Any other questions?
Ed, real quick, do you know when the audit will be in, or?
As soon as he gets it here, yeah, I'll let you know.
Okay, all right. And then, just so the budget committee knows, we're gonna talk to the board a little bit. I met with, who was that group that we met with, it's a bonding.
Oh, Davenport.
Davenport. Met with Davenport. The county's looking at refinancing the bond issues, from 2014, right?
The last piece of that 2014
Yeah.
bond issue.
So we put that on the agenda for the board to approve the resolution. Got some documents on there, I've got the resolution on there. And that way, they're looking at refinancing the bond issue.
And it comes back, they will They will be on your screen next week, and then they'll be on the screen for the board and the school board on the 12th to talk about where they are in this process. It's
Is there a number that you're looking at as far as from the county on?
well, we're trying to look at 5%, and and the question becomes, the next 6 months, if we don't do it right now, I told our board last night, we should forget it until next year, because the market's gonna be up and down and around Robin Hood's barn from now till after the election. And then it'll settle down in January and be more level. And that would be, if this doesn't work, then that would be the time to look at it. Davenport was talking about a fall sale, but I'm very skeptical of that just before the election. It would be in October, and the market just, it's all over the place that time of year.
Yeah.
We got some of our basis points today, but
Mhm.
it could easily go right back up tomorrow.
Could go right back up and go right back down, and it depends upon what day. And that's the advantage of giving your chair the authority to say yes or no the day of the sale.
Yeah.
Because then when the rates come in, we get to tell, we've got about an hour that we can tell them, yeah, we're gonna take it, or no, we're not.
Are we locked in at that point?
Well, after she's done,
Yeah,
then we are locked.
okay,
But until that point, we have the right to pull out.
okay.
And that's what we really want to be sure of, because that we can pull out.
I've looked at some of these tax-free, municipal bonds and public bonds, and they, it's not a bad investment.
No, it's a good investment. It's very good. People have the money and looking for a place to put it. They're good investments.
Yeah.
So that's on my agenda, for the board to approve the resolution, next Wednesday.
And this is a resale. It's no new money, no new project or anything.
It's kind of like refinancing your house.
So we meet together, our next meeting is our joint board, our whole board and your whole board on the 12th then.
Yes.
All right.
And that's at 4?
At
5 o'clock, I think.
5 o'clock, 5 o'clock. All right,
Now, do you
thank
guys
you
have
all.
a meeting after that, Ed?
Thank you.
Where are we meeting?
And we have a
Oh,
meeting.
where are we?
Are we gonna be out
here or
there?
Yes.
Well, just meet down, we'll meet down there.
On
That's
the
where we
back
always do
end?
that's where we always do the joint.
And then
they
the
also-
board has a meeting up front at 7
At
o'clock.
Gotcha.
You and I need to get together sometime.